The air crackled with laughter. Music pulsed. It was a good night. My friends Liam, Maya, and Chloe were sprawled on the floor, jokes spilling from their lips like spilled secrets. Liam was regaling us with another one of his infamous stories, his hands waving in the air. Maya's laugh was infectious. Chloe shook her head, pretending to be exasperated. I felt a smile stretch across my face. This was happiness, pure and simple. It was a Friday night, and the world felt full of promise. Earlier that day, Liam had aced his exams. Maya had landed her dream internship. Chloe had finally finished writing her novel. We had so much to celebrate. The apartment buzzed with our shared joy, the energy almost tangible. We were young, we were alive, and we were invincible, or so we thought. The doorbell rang, a sharp intrusion in our bubble of joy. "I'll get it," I said, already halfway to my feet. As I opened the door, a wave of noise from the hallway outside washed into the apartment, the sounds of the city that never sleeps. Standing in the doorway was a man I had never seen before. He was tall and wiry, with a scowl etched onto his face. He looked at me, then past me into the apartment, his eyes narrowed. "Is this the party?" he asked, his voice a gravelly rumble. I felt a prickle of unease, a discordant note in the symphony of our joy. Something about him seemed off, but I pushed the feeling aside. Maybe he was just having a bad day. "Yeah, come on in," I said, stepping aside. He entered the apartment without a word, his gaze sweeping over the room, lingering on each of us for a beat too long. The air, once light with laughter, felt thick and heavy, the weight of his presence pressing down on us. My friends fell silent, their smiles fading as they too sensed the shift in atmosphere. The stranger walked towards the center of the room, his movements stiff and unnatural. He was wearing a leather jacket that looked a size too small, and his jeans were ripped at the knees. He ran a hand through his greasy hair, his eyes darting around nervously. "What are you all staring at?" he asked, his voice laced with an edge of aggression. His words hung in the air unanswered. "We're just having some fun," Liam said, trying to lighten the mood. "Care to join us?" He gestured towards the empty space beside him. The stranger just snorted, a humorless sound. "Fun? You think this is fun?" he spat, his eyes blazing with a sudden inexplicable rage. "You have no idea what fun is." My unease morphed into full-blown anxiety. I wanted him gone. This wasn't the kind of party where uninvited guests were welcome, especially not ones who seemed intent on picking a fight. "Look," I said, my voice firm despite the tremor running through me. "If you're not going to be civil, I think you should leave." My words, meant to diffuse the situation, had the opposite effect. The stranger's face contorted in anger, and he reached into his jacket. Everything seemed to happen in slow motion. My eyes widened in horror as I saw the glint of metal in the stranger's hand. A gun. He had a gun. Before any of us could react, before we could even breathe, he raised his arm and fired a shot into the ceiling. The sound of the gunshot was deafening, echoing through the apartment, the smell of gunpowder acrid in the air. The music stopped abruptly, plunging the room into an eerie silence. A collective gasp escaped our lips. Liam, Maya, and Chloe were frozen in place, their eyes wide with terror. I felt a surge of adrenaline, my heart pounding in my chest. The stranger laughed, a harsh, grating sound that sent chills down my spine. "That got your attention, didn't it?" he snarled, waving the gun around recklessly. Terror choked my voice. This couldn't be happening, not here, not to us. In the blink of an eye, our celebratory night had turned into a nightmare. The stranger, his eyes wild, scanned the room, his gaze finally settling on me. "You," he said, his voice low and menacing. "You were trying to be a hero, weren't you?" He pointed the gun directly at me. My breath hitched in my throat. This was it. This was how it ended. But then, just as suddenly as his anger had flared, it seemed to dissipate. He lowered the gun, a strange, almost vacant look crossing his face. He stumbled back, bumping into the coffee table, sending a stack of magazines tumbling to the floor. I gotta go," he mumbled, his voice slurred. He turned and stumbled towards the door, his gait unsteady. He slammed the door shut behind him, leaving us in stunned silence. The smell of gunpowder lingered in the air, a stark reminder of what had just transpired. For a moment, none of us moved. We were frozen in the tableau of terror, the echo of the gunshot still ringing in our ears. Then, as if on cue, we all sprang to our feet. "Is everyone okay?" Liam asked, his voice trembling. Maya and Chloe just nodded, their faces pale. I could feel my own heart still racing in my chest. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving behind a trembling fear. What had just happened? Who was that man? And why had he fired a gun in my apartment? We spent the next few minutes in a daze, checking on each other, making sure no one was hurt. The silence was broken only by the sound of our own ragged breathing. The party atmosphere was gone, replaced by a heavy blanket of fear and unease. We decided to call the police, but just as I was about to dial 911, we heard a loud thump from the hallway outside. We exchanged uneasy glances. Cautiously, Liam approached the door and peered through the peephole. "It's him," he whispered, his eyes wide. "He's collapsed in the hallway." I rushed to the door and threw it open. The stranger was lying sprawled on the floor, his eyes closed, his chest heaving erratically. The gun lay a few feet away, a silent menace. He was clearly in distress, his face contorted in pain. Fear warred with compassion within me. This was the man who had just terrorized us, who had fired a gun in our home, and yet he was clearly in trouble. Could I turn my back on him in his moment of need? The decision was made in an instant. "Help me get him inside," I said to my friends, my voice firm despite the tremor that still ran through me. They hesitated for a moment, then nodded, their faces etched with a mixture of fear and concern. Together we carefully lifted the stranger and carried him into the apartment.